CEO's shocking discovery, dishwasher worked 100+ hours without pay. The incredible truth exposed. Sarah stood in the back of the bustling kitchen, the sound of clattering dishes and sizzling pans a constant backdrop to her exhaustion. Each scrape of the sponge against porcelain felt like a dull reminder of dreams deferred, dreams of a college degree that flickered teasingly at the corners of her mind. At 32, she was a widow with 2 children, drowning in bills and the relentless pressure to put food on the table. The weight of her financial burdens pressed against her chest, squashing any remaining flicker of hope. Juggling 2 jobs at the restaurant left her with hollow eyes and aching muscles. She wished to provide a better life for her kids. Yet here she was washing dishes, scrubbing away the remnants of someone else's meal while her dreams faded with each rinse. David, the CEO of the restaurant group, was in a boardroom filled with investors, a world away from the chaos of the kitchen. He thrived on ambition, yet now, amid mounting pressure for profits, unease gnawed at him. An anonymous tip had reached him, revealing the astonishing fact that one of his employees had logged over 100 hours of unpaid overtime. This strange discovery unraveled a thread that David soon found impossible to ignore. He pushed back the creased papers in front of him, fighting the murmurs of doubt whispering through his mind. Could it be true? Were there countless Sarahs out there, toiling day and night for scraps while he reaped the rewards? Before Sarah could catch her breath, the sink filled again, thick steam clouding her thoughts. The drudgery was a familiar comfort, almost zen-like in its predictability, but with each passing hour in the industrial kitchen, another worry wormed its way into her mind. The eviction notice lay on the kitchen table at home, taunting her with the truth: she was one paycheck away from losing everything. Could she ever shift from the safe ground of survival to reaching the heights of her dreams? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As Sarah's gaze drifted to the door, she spotted David entering the kitchen, his crisp suit a stark contrast to the grease-splattered apron worn by her colleagues. For a brief moment, their eyes met, a jolt of connection that electrified the air. All at once, the noise became muffled, her heart raced, and her mind flooded with doubt. Did her struggles mean anything to him? Would he ever understand the sacrifices she made daily? David's internal battle raged as he watched her work, each scrub and wipe becoming more than just an action. They transformed into a vivid depiction of sacrifice that haunted his conscience. His hands trembled at the thought of confronting the issues. Would he risk it all, shatter the crafted image of success, and fight for lives like Sarah's? The clock ticked down to a pivotal board meeting, an ultimatum of sorts. Ambition clawed at him, promising power and prestige, whispering that the fewer distractions he had, the better his performance. But Sarah's quiet resolve burned in his mind. He could almost hear her unspoken words echoing against his conscience. He stood at a precipice. Would he uphold the callous expectations of his investors or rise for justice? As the seconds slipped away, Sarah's face haunted him, her battle bold and real. All he needed was one final push to choose authenticity over appearance, but here he stood, on the edge of decision, a tumult of fear and purpose raging within him. The silence deepened as he prepared to speak, every eye in the room awaited his words, and his heart thudded louder against the weight of what lay ahead. Would they hear him roar? Or would he falter, locking the truth away forever? The moment David opened his mouth, the room hung on his every word, but what he planned to say tangled in his throat. Instead of the scripted assurances about profits and projections, a different truth simmered just beneath the surface, desperate to escape. He could feel Sarah's ethereal presence behind him, her spirit compelling him to speak up, to advocate for what was right rather than what was profitable. Back in the kitchen, Sarah shook her head, forcing herself to focus on the mountain of dishes piled high. The chaos of the kitchen allowed her to escape the haunting thoughts of her financial despair. Scrubbing plates became a ritual, a futile attempt to wash away the accumulating stress. But as there was a lingering shadow in the corners of her mind, the reality of her situation tugged at her. Her children needed stability, a smile instead of a sunken face weighed down by worry. David breathed in sharply, the weight of decision pressing heavily on his chest. What would he offer the investors? A polished facade or a reflection of true equity within the company? His thoughts drifted back to Sarah, the earnest way she worked, the stifled dreams in her eyes, and the knowledge that behind every unpaid hour lay the potential for something greater. Holding the reins of a restaurant chain felt distant now. Instead, he wanted to challenge the narrative, to reshape the culture within his company. The boardroom echoed with disinterest as David's peers continued their discussions. They were nothing but shadows, cloaked in tailored suits, each focused on the bottom line without considering the humanity behind their profits. David's heartbeat synchronized with the ticking clock, a continuous reminder of the stakes at hand. Was he willing to sacrifice his status to fight for the invisible workers, the ones like Sarah, laboring under the crushing burden of their unacknowledged contributions? Meanwhile, the scalding water stung Sarah's hands as she ran the sponge over another plate. Each familiar motion turned contemplative. What if the opportunity she yearned for could materialize within reach? What if David learned about her hardships and the lives of others like her? Her heart ignited with a glimmer of hope that perhaps change was sorely needed, not just in her own life, but for her co-workers as well. Would she dare to rise above her circumstances, to find that elusive path to empowerment and change that felt impossible? The thought both terrified and thrilled her, a fragile line between fear of failure and the exhilarating promise of a new beginning. David clenched his jaw, the rest of the meeting slurring into an inaudible haze around him. Could he portray the courage she unknowingly instilled in him? The seed of rebellion had been sown, and as it took root, he felt an unfamiliar surge of determination course through him. The board members droned on, but in the depth of his being, he began to recognize a shift, a flicker of purpose that urged him to rise, to stand up for Sarah and everyone else silenced. As the meeting descended into a monotonous rhythm, David made his decision. He would confront the board, armed with the knowledge that true leadership involved sacrifice. But uncertainty still lingered as the weight of the moment loomed. Could he face the storm that would undoubtedly follow? With renewed clarity, he straightened his back, the flicker turning into a flame. This was the moment. Just as he opened his mouth to voice his intentions, a familiar vibrating tone interrupted the silence. His phone buzzed with an urgent note. The message held both promise and foreboding, an unexpected development that would change everything. Would it rally the board behind him, or would it push him into a deeper chasm of conflict? David stared blankly at his phone, the screen illuminating shockwaves of anticipation and dread. The message bore the unmistakable name of a senior vice president, and its contents were inscrutable. Instantly, his mind went into overdrive, parsing through the implications. Would this be the catalyst that would threaten everything he had worked for, or could it empower his newly forged resolve? Taking a deep breath, he slid his finger across the screen, revealing the words that would redefine his course. We've just received some concerning information regarding our operational practices in the restaurants. Immediate action may be required. There it was, the creeping awareness that the company's policies might be hiding severe labor violations, perhaps even involving Sarah and her overwhelming situation. A surge of anger quickly burned through his earlier trepidation. How many had been quietly bearing financial burdens for the sake of the company's success? He thought of Sarah's grim reality, of the bruising hours spent toiling over dishes, and a swell of determination rose within him. This was bigger than him, bigger than the boardroom politics. It was about people's lives, about the families devastated by the shadows of corporate greed. As the meeting carried on, the atmosphere thickened with indifference. David's colleagues appeared oblivious to the revelations swirling within him. Each monotonous detail they discussed felt like a hollow shell, starkly contrasting with the vibrancy of the lives at stake, the very lives he had previously marginalized for the sake of business. Not anymore. Are we addressing the reports? David's voice cut through the room, brazen and urgent. Heads turned, eyebrows raised, curiosity mingled with surprise. It was a divergence from the agenda, an unscripted moment that signified a shift. There are serious allegations about our treatment of employees. We can't ignore David, hold on. The board chair, a robust figure with a penchant for tradition, interjected. This isn't the right time to divert from our focus. His dismissive tone chafed David's nerves, igniting the fire within. The time for ignoring this is over. He looked around the room, seeking validation among his peers. What he found instead was a smattering of apprehensive reactions and underlying irritation. We owe it to our workers to uphold ethical standards. It's the least we can do. Your passion is admirable, another board member said, barely concealing disdain. But passion won't pay the bills or reassure our investors. Investors? What about our moral obligations? David pressed, sensing the tension in the room coiling tighter. This was not mere business, it was real lives and real struggles breaking through corporate facades. Back in the kitchen, Sarah fought against her own demon. The clattering of pots and pans filled the air, but her mind raced with the implications of David's potential courage. Could his awakening actually translate into change? Her hands trembled as she scrubbed dishes, wondering if now was the moment to finally voice her fears to someone who could help. The weight of silence felt heavier with each passing moment, the unsaid becoming unbearable. As David persisted, pushing back against the inertia that dominated the board, he felt a shift. His own vulnerability became a source of strength. With every word, he peeled back the layers of intimidation, exposing the reality they often ignored. The idea that he had the power to manifest change, to be the voice for those silenced, became intoxicating. But what support could he ultimately expect from the board? Would they take decisive action, or would they attempt to bury these revelations like they had done so many times before? Just as he braced himself for a potential backlash, the senior vice president sent him a follow-up message: "We need a meeting immediately. Prepare yourself for the implications this has on your leadership." The tension escalated. He hadn't just challenged the board, he set the stage for a confrontation that would redefine his role, his values, and perhaps the future of the company. As David stood, torn between hope and fear, a thought solidified within him: this was more than about policy, it was a reckoning. He was on the brink of a pivotal moment that would either affirm his choices or lead him down a path fraught with peril. What awaited him in that meeting? Would his newfound courage inspire change, or would it fracture everything he had built? David entered the meeting room with an unshakable resolve, the air thickening with anticipation. Each step felt heavier as he approached the polished table, where the board members shifted uneasily. He could sense the resistance, it hung like humidity before a storm. This was not merely another gathering, it was a potential rupture in the corporate facade that had concealed the company's ethical failures for far too long. Seating himself, he ran a mental checklist of the complaints he had reviewed just hours prior. Names, hours worked, paychecks void of labor equity. These were not just figures on a balance sheet but narratives of hardship. Would they have the courage to delve into the uncomfortable truths that lay ahead? "Thank you for gathering on such short notice," the senior vice president began, his tone a mix of authority and apprehension. "We have a serious issue that needs addressing." David felt the pulse of anxiety in his chest, an instinctive response to the unfolding drama. This was his moment to propel the dialogue into a territory where only bravery would suffice. "What we should address isn't just the reports but our ethical stance as a company," he interjected before the senior vice president could delve into the report. The director of finance shot him a steely glance. "This isn't merely a discussion about principles, David. There are profits to protect. And at what cost?" David fired back, adrenaline bubbling to the surface. "If we continue to ignore the serious allegations, we jeopardize our credibility, not just with employees but with our customers and investors too. This isn't about profit margins, it's about our humanity." Murmurs rippled around the table. Some leaned forward, captivated, others recoiled as if he were exposing a raw nerve. Yet, David stood firm, buoyed by a revelation that his voice mattered. He was no longer a pawn in corporate hierarchy, he had become an advocate. Employees working excessive hours without pay, David articulated, clutching the edge of the table. Employees like Sarah, who spend sleepless nights working beyond their limits. We owe it to them and to ourselves to act with integrity. The weight of his words pressed heavily against the skeptical glances. It was then that the board chair leaned forward, feigning a display of concern. Passion is commendable, but how do you propose we handle the legal consequences of our operational failures without losing our market position? The ideological clash ignited within him. He realized the pivot lay not in fighting for policy reform alone but in reimagining the company's identity from the ground up. We can rework our operational practices to align with our values, he proposed, clarity cutting through the ongoing chaos. Let us take the lead by offering transparency in our hiring and compensation. It will position us as an ethical leader in the industry rather than a company running on the invisible backs of our workers. As his words settled, David recognized the shift in the room's energy. But underneath the emerging respect was a simmering doubt. Could they indulge in such a fundamental restructuring, or would they cling to the familiarity of apathy? Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted when the only board member who had remained silent, an older member with a reputation for being bluntly honest, leaned back in his chair. And what if this disrupts our bottom line? Are you prepared to be the one to answer for that? The question hung in the air, a blade coated in uncertainty. David felt the gaze of his colleagues weighing on him, testing his resolve. This was not just about ideals, it was a daunting personal challenge that threatened his professional future. The room pulsated with tension, each passing moment an invitation for introspection. Would he adhere to the code of silence and endure the emotional toll of complicity, or would he fortify his conviction against the corporate tide? He took a breath, feeling the weight of generations of decisions behind him, and committed fully to his path. I might not have all the answers now, he confessed. But I would prefer to fight for what is right than thrive on what's wrong. In that decisive moment, David had crossed a threshold not just into a new professional territory but toward profound personal transformation. The real test awaited him in navigating the aftermath of his declarations. What repercussions would he face? Would the board embrace this ethical awakening, or would they push back, trying to silence him once again? The time had come to face not only the board's answer but his fears as well. Silence dominated the room, stretching uncomfortably as the board processed David's bold declaration. His heart raced, the strong currents of uncertainty pulled at him. He could feel the hesitation looming, not just among the board members, but within himself. Every challenge he faced now was intertwined with deeper layers of his identity, his past compliance aching against the present, where a newfound integrity refused to blend into the shadows of corporate indifference. Finally, the senior vice president broke the tension. David, he said, his voice steady but visibly strained, it's admirable to champion ethics, but this isn't charity work. We're here to make money. Balancing our mission with profitability requires careful thought. David's mind raced. It was true, he'd been juggling his values against a backdrop of financial reality for too long. This singular moment could redefine his ethos. He wasn't merely risking his job, he was about to redefine who he was professionally. He steadied his breath to quell the sudden anxiety threatening to derail him. Ethics and profitability aren't mutually exclusive, he argued, his voice low but insistent. What if we could build a business model where ethical practices aren't merely an expense but a competitive advantage? The board members exchanged glances, a ripple of confusion mixed with intrigue crossing the table. Inspiration surged in David, he was driven by the fear of irrelevance, not just in business but in life as a whole. He visualized the weary workers who relentlessly toiled, their unspoken stories were an unyielding source of motivation. Could he foster a culture that brought dignity back to their labor? He continued, fueled by the sensation of liberation coursing through his veins. Consider this, companies that prioritize ethical treatment amplify their brand loyalty and market share. People trust transparency over the shadows of deceit. He paused, searching for their eyes, gauging their willingness to traverse this uncharted territory. It's an investment in both our workforce and our reputation. Several members leaned in, caught between skepticism and interest. The older board member, the one who had questioned his resolve, studied David, the lines on his face softening, if only slightly. "You're talking about a paradigm shift," he said slowly, as if weighing the implications of David's vision. "Change is slow and costly." "That's where my commitment lies," David countered. His voice was steadier now, a deepening conviction breaking through. "We begin small. We analyze our payroll practices, enhance transparency, and highlight worker contributions in our marketing. Creating a narrative that showcases our ethical commitment can capture public interest and foster greater revenue." Faint murmurs traveled around the table, and he sensed a shift and undercurrent of recognition that his argument had merit. But doubt lingered, and the trepidation was palpable. David knew that convincing this room to transform belief into action was essential, not just for the company's future but to fulfill his own moral compass. As conversations began to burgeon, one board member hesitantly expressed, "What happens if we experiment and things go wrong?" The backlash could be tremendous. The fear in their eyes mirrored his own internal doubt, their caution reflecting his pressing concern, the uncertainty of potential failure. "I am willing to take that risk," David declared, feeling a resolve surging through him. "I would rather take the risk doing the right thing than succeed by compromising our values." In that moment, a shift in the room was palpable. It was no longer merely about business, it became personal. David was laying his character on the line, exposing the core of who he was to a jury of skeptics. His heart raced as he realized that he wasn't just battling for policy change, he was wrestling with his own fear of being marginalized again, a fear that kept whispering he might not belong at this table. Suddenly, the atmosphere grew electric with possibility and fear. The board members hardly moved, lost in thought as they measured his fervor against potential ramifications. He saw flickers of consideration, and he felt emboldened. But lingering beneath the surface, doubts lay in wait. Would the board truly entertain the idea? What would the repercussions be if they faltered? David was not naive, he understood the stakes. Would this transformative vision land him in the crosshairs of backlash, or could he shape a path toward a more principled corporate future? As he sat surrounded by the echoes of hesitation, one truth was evident: it was time for a personal reckoning. The moment of clarity loomed ahead, radiating both promise and peril. Would he find the courage to step further into this uncharted journey of ethical rebirth, or would the specter of conventionality imprison him once more? His next move held the weight of his professional destiny. The hum of conversation punctuated the air as the board meeting began to shift, yet David felt isolated within the thrumming atmosphere. Each second ticked harder against the backdrop of his internal struggle. Would ambition or fear dictate his next steps? The exchange of ideas sparked enthusiasm. He could see them leaning in, thinking, reconsidering their own standpoints. Yet, that flickering hope was countered by a palpable unease that skated along the edges of his consciousness. "We have regular clients who depend on us. Are you suggesting we alter our pricing model based on ethics?" One of the younger members challenged, her tone laced with skepticism. Her boldness unnerved him. What if her argument shone a light on vulnerabilities he hadn't anticipated? David took a deep breath, forcing calm into his racing heart. This was no longer just about presenting data to appease investors. It was personal. This was about who he wanted to become. What if we marketed our ethical practices? Companies like ours can drive profit by attracting consumers who prioritize integrity. It could turn client skepticism into loyalty, he rebutted, struggling to wield conviction in his voice. As the words left his lips, David's mind cast itself back to the dishwasher who worked silently in the background, relentless yet unacknowledged. Would he allow that silent hardship to fade away unnoticed? Every face at the table shone with its own concerns, yet none seemed to whisper the truth of these hidden stories. He sensed a growing urgency to link his vision with their fears. He needed them to view the ethical shift as an innovative advantage, not just a diversion from the usual revenue streams. The senior vice president, still observing him, shifted uneasily. David had pushed open a door, and what lay beyond was both thrilling and frightening. Let us say we agree to experiment. We risk losing clients, tarnishing our brand, the older man finally conceded, eyes still piercing through David's facade. A challenge indeed. They won't leave us if we show them we genuinely care, David replied quickly, fueled by a daring energy that swept over him like fire. I would be willing to put my own salary at risk if it meant we could integrate ethical practices into our everyday procedures. Silence dominated the room again. David's heart skipped a beat as his boldness echoed in the vacant air. His proposition lay stark and naked, he felt exposed. The risk was monumental, yet he reveled in the very act of asserting himself. Every muscle in his body urged him forward into new territory. One board member glanced at another, perhaps sensing the tide shift, and he pressed, "We have to gather data to map performance and profitability. Are you prepared to present your findings by next week?" "Yes," David exclaimed, eagerness flooding his veins. This was the moment he longed for, an opportunity to prove that values could translate into measurable success. Yet beneath the exhilaration lay a nagging uncertainty that clung to his consciousness. The fear of failure haunted him. After the meeting, as the board members filed out, David remained, alone amidst the scattered papers and lingering fragrances of coffee. Clarity washed over him as he realized the path ahead was precarious. He had challenged their norms, but would their skepticism thaw in the glow of facts and fervor? He took out pen and paper. Methodically, he began to outline his next steps. Gather data, analyze it, adjust their strategies, reframe the brand's narrative. Each line brought a thrill of determination coursing through him, but also the weight of responsibility. He could feel the echo of his previous compliance beckoning to him, a whisper of doubt urging him to retreat. "I can do this," he murmured, willing the words to anchor him. Yet he knew this journey was not merely about the company or its profits, it was deeper. It was about confronting the shadows of who he'd been, the complacency that felt increasingly foreign to him. When David returned home, he was worn but alive with purpose. He could feel the tremors of change rumbling within him, awakening dormant attributes he hadn't fully explored. Each step forward was a commitment to both his profession and his own ethics. But then, a thought struck him: the dishwasher had shared unyielding endurance for so long unnoticed. How many other unseen contributions lauded ethical performance were hidden in plain sight, waiting to be unveiled? The race against time loomed sharp in his mind. Would he realize the vision he wanted before it was too late? Would he summon the strength to uncover these hidden narratives, or would they slip through the cracks of his ambition? The sun slipped beneath the horizon as David sat with a jolt, his laptop casting a soft glow in the dim light of his living room. He'd spent hours poring over spreadsheets, metrics, and case studies, each click of the keyboard echoing in the silence of the night. An undeniable urgency propelled him forward. He felt like a soldier preparing for an unseen battle. With every new piece of data, a broader picture emerged. Ethical marketing could reshape their branding, transforming their narrative into one that aligned with the values they spoke but rarely practiced. David's analytical mind danced gingerly along the edges of possibilities, envisioning vibrant presentations and persuasive arguments. Yet lurking beneath the surface was a tidal wave of self-doubt. What if he was wrong? What if the hypothesis he was building, fueled by hope, shattered against the harsh rocks of reality? He stepped away from the computer, rubbing his temples as if to coax clarity from the fog of anxiety. The memory of the nameless dishwasher lingered like a specter at the edges of his thoughts. He realized it wasn't just about profits and charts, it was about people, the shadows behind the figures, the untold stories binding their collective experiences. Each data point represented a narrative waiting to be told, and he felt the weight of responsibility dripping off of those realizations. Gripped by a sudden resolve, David grabbed his notebook again, this time sketching out a plan to initiate conversations with employees across various departments. Their insights would illuminate the unseen struggles, allowing him to craft a narrative steeped in authenticity. He wanted their voices to rise above the boardroom chatter, revealing not just the issues but also solutions born from collective wisdom. Saturday approached like an anxious heartbeat. The office had been eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the fervor of the last board meeting. David deliberated over how to approach his colleagues, wondering if they would even be willing to share their experiences. What if they preferred to remain in the comfort of the unseen, unnoticed, uncelebrated? "David, you here?" called out Linda, the chief marketing officer, popping her head into his office, her usual exuberance glowing. "Yeah, just working on something," he said, his voice faltering slightly as he wrestled with the vulnerability he was beginning to weave into his actions. "Mind if I take a look?" she asked, stepping closer, alert to his unease. Actually, David paused, wrestling with the scenario unfolding in his mind. "Can we chat instead? I want to gather thoughts, from everyone. About the changes we want to make." Her brow arched with curiosity rather than skepticism. "Sure, what's on your mind?" As he spoke, David equipped himself with daring honesty. He needed to convey the necessity of these conversations, to share how integral each perspective was to the collective purpose he envisioned. Familiar trepidation rippled within him, but also something else, a flickering flame of interconnectedness woven through their shared journey. However, as he laid out the plan, tension seeped back into his muscles. He needed the team's engagement to fully commit to what lay ahead, a shift toward transparency, integrity, and shared purpose. But what if that engagement didn't come? What if his appeal for connection was met with reluctance or dismissal? "David, this is ambitious," Linda finally said, her face serious, "but I think it could be revolutionary. If we're all on board." If. Those two letters crashed against his resolve like a tide threatening to erode his growing determination. He realized that collaboration was a choice each colleague had to make, one he could only facilitate. That evening, he returned home unsettled. The dishwasher's quiet endurance echoed louder now, mingling with the doubt that had surged through him during the day. Had David tapped into something hidden, or was it just an elusive fantasy whispering for recognition? He could have it all, a vision draped in collaboration and authenticity, but that desire sat precariously on the edge of certainty. As David lay in bed, a question hovered in the dim light of his fears: what would happen if he failed to engage those around him, if the push for ethical integrity crumbled beneath their skepticism? Tomorrow would test his resolve. He would gather the stories of those who had been sidelined, but could he summon the courage to uncover the truths that lay beneath the surface? With the specter of hesitation looming close, he closed his eyes, already bracing for an undeniable confrontation with the fears that awaited him in the light of a new day. The morning dawned, illuminating David's room with a stream of light that felt more like a spotlight than a gentle awakening. He blinked awake, feeling the weight of the day ahead crashing onto him like a wave. Gathering the courage to rise from the bed, he knew there was no escaping the uncomfortable conversations awaiting him. Today would define not only his journey but potentially the course of the entire company's future. After a quick breakfast, he arrived at the office with a pulsing heartbeat, the shadows of doubt still lingering over his resolve. Did he really possess the capability to inspire his colleagues to embrace this shift toward the ethical narrative he envisioned? The myriad faces, often distracted, preoccupied with their own workloads, flashed through his mind. He hoped each might connect with the cause, yet uncertainty gnawed at him, reminding him how they had been entrenched in a corporate mentality that valued profit over purpose. His first opportunity came when he stepped into the break room, a casual gathering place for employees. David took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders as he approached a group of colleagues milling about. "Hey, everyone," he said, forcing a lightness into his tone, though each word felt like a heavy stone dislodged from a frail dam. "I'd love to hear your thoughts on a new direction I'm considering for our branding strategy. It's about how we present ourselves, more authentic, more aligned with who we really are. Can we chat?" He met mixed reactions. While some nodded with feigned enthusiasm, others diverted their gaze, retreating to safe conversation amongst themselves. David's stomach churned, and for a moment, he hesitated, a flicker of self-doubt attempting to draw him back into the shadows. But he pushed through, determined to face the discomfort head-on. "I want to know your stories, what drives you, what keeps you up at night? Every perspective matters. A silence fell over the room, one that felt as thick as molasses. It was broken, thankfully, by Megan from HR, who had a small, constant smile that often put others at ease. That's a big ask, David. We're often just focused on getting the job done. We don't really share our personal struggles in the workplace. Exactly, David replied, his heart racing but voice steady. But it's time we do. Every story we share could help us redefine our mission. It might even make us better at what we do. Can we start talking about what those struggles look like? Slowly, like the reluctant opening of a flower, conversation sparked to life in the break room. He listened intently as they shared experiences that resonated with the very values he aimed to foster. David felt each interaction chip away at his hesitation, revealing a deeper understanding of the collective pain of neglect that ran through the workplace. As stories began to unfold, he noted the unique threads connecting them: unfulfilled promises, burnout, and the strain of silence. Their voices knit a tapestry of shared humanity, each voice lending strength to the others, yet, as they shared, his heart ached for the dark truth: the dishwasher employee once nameless now loomed larger in his consciousness than ever. Yet, amid the revelations, one pointed remark struck him deeply. Gary, a seasoned engineer, leaned forward, shadows dancing in his eyes. It sounds great, David, but this is a pretty big leap. Are we really ready for all this change? What if we fail? The question sliced through his heart. What if they weren't ready? What if all this effort crumbled under pressure? The challenge sat heavy, shaking the foundation of his resolve. Change is scary, David admitted, swallowing hard to summon strength. But if we don't try, we risk losing everything we say we stand for. I can't promise an easy road, but if we work together, we can navigate this. The words poured out, stronger than he felt, a beacon in the tumult. As the conversations ebbed and flowed, David felt something shift within him, a current of determination igniting, a spark able to navigate the waves of fear and hesitation. Yet, it was only the beginning. The stories shared strengthened him, but he also sensed an impending challenge, an obstacle that could bring him face to face with those most resistant to change: the upper management team. With that realization, the stakes crystallized. He would need to prepare for the meeting, to convey the urgency of the shift to a skeptical leadership team. Would they dismiss the emotion-laden narratives? What if they questioned his judgment? As he left the break room with a heavy heart, the sense of impending confrontation weighed on him. He needed to consolidate his insights and solidify his arguments to present a compelling narrative, one that might change not just the company's future but illuminate hidden truths that lay beneath its glittering facade. The specter of doubt shadowing him deepened once more as he prepared for the difficult task ahead. Was he enough to face the challenges that loomed just beyond the threshold of the boardroom? Would the stories he gathered translate into the strength he desperately needed when it mattered most? David faced his own reflection in the glass door, courage mingling with uncertainty, the anticipation crackling in the air. The moment of truth was nigh, and he wasn't certain he was ready. David took a deep breath, forcing himself to turn away from the reflection that mirrored his inner turmoil. With steady steps, he moved toward his office, where the walls felt like they were slowly closing in on him. The hour was approaching, and his heart raced with each tick of the clock as he steeled himself for what lay ahead. The narrative he sought to persuade the leadership team about was more than a professional endeavor, it was a moral crusade that had become intertwined with his very identity. He sank into his chair and opened his laptop, drowning in a sea of notes, employee stories, and statistics he had frantically gathered. He could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. The voices echoing in the break room stirred a mixture of hope and trepidation within him. He needed to convey the urgency of their collective experiences without diluting their significance. Moments turned into hour-long revisions, crafting a speech that would resonate with data-driven executives who rarely engaged in the personal stories David held dear. He lacked their polished rhymes of logic, the often technical language they spoke fluently. Instead, he leaned on the raw emotion of those shared accounts. He wouldn't dazzle them with elaborate presentations, he would confront them with humanity. As he typed, he realized he needed to develop more than just a powerful narrative. He needed to forge an argument rooted in sound logic backed by emotional authenticity. He carefully crafted points that linked financial performance with employee well-being, illustrating how engagement cultivated through shared struggles could lead to innovative solutions. His thoughts turned to Gary's lingering doubt. The question still echoed in David's mind: were they, as a company, truly ready for the upheaval he aimed to inspire? The narrative wasn't solely about ethical branding. The implications of failure resided within each employee, the heartbeats behind the machinery of profit-driven motives. He paused, staring at the screen, and asked himself what was at stake for him. Was this fight a personal quest for validation or a selfless journey toward ensuring a better workplace? The realization struck him hard: it was a blend of both. His ambition couldn't be separated from the ideals he wished to uphold. Forging a new path wasn't merely professional, it was deeply personal. In a moment of clarity, David remembered the narrative he had created, the tenacity of those voices shared with him, each one revealing layers of resilience and vulnerability. Each employee's struggle was proof that they all fought battles unseen, tucked beneath the surface of sterile cubicles and corporate facades. He closed his eyes, visualizing each face who had spoken, and felt their stories morph into a steadfast armor. With renewed determination, he finished his speech. It might not be elaborate, but it would be sincere. It would speak to the undeniable humanity encapsulated within the company he represented. Minutes ticked down as he prepared for the meeting. Dave tried to calm his racing heart, but the ding of his calendar alert sent a rush of adrenaline through him. It was time. He straightened his posture and cleared his throat, steeling himself for the challenge he would soon face. What if the management dismissed his views? Or worse, what if the stories were met with apathy? As he stepped into the conference room, the shadow of doubt loomed again. He scanned the faces of the upper management team, impenetrable and stern. Would they see the value in what he had to share? Anxiety threatened to claw its way back into his mind, but David swallowed the fear. He had come too far to turn away now. Today, he began, steadying his voice, I want to talk about who we are and who we can be. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and a heavy silence fell, leaving him exposed in a chamber of unyielding scrutiny. This was the making or breaking of not just his vision but perhaps his career, and with a spark of trepidation, David realized that the outcome of the conversation could redefine everything he fought for over the past weeks. The time had come to confront the heart of the workplace he hoped to transform. David stood before the boardroom, poised yet apprehensive. The carefully formatted presentation on his laptop flickered to life as he began, but it was not the statistics or corporate jargon he wished to impart. He was here to echo the cries of those who had remained silent for far too long. Today was an inflection point, not just for him, but for the lives of those who had waited in the shadows, the Sarahs of the organization. Today, I want to talk about who we are and who we can be, he declared, suppressing the tremor in his voice. The room remained still, eyes locked on him, a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. His heart raced, driven by the urgency of authenticity. David ventured into the stories he'd collected, voices that had shared their trials with him. Yesterday, I stood with a group of colleagues, people who work tirelessly, often overlooked, yet their edges have remained unpolished in the face of corporate progress, he began. He painted a vivid picture of Sarah, a woman who scrubs dishes in hopes of returning to her education, of Gary, who had fears about transitioning into a more ethical labor force. I felt their burdens resonate with my own, David continued, daring to step closer to the heart of the matter. What if we transformed our practices to not only uplift our bottom line but elevate the very humans woven into the fabric of this company? The board members shifted in their seats, a few whispering among themselves. He could see the glimmer of resistance etched on their expressions. Some could still only hear dollar signs, but David pressed onwards, bolstered by the bravery of those voices he now represented. I understand this isn't just about profits, but about redefining our values. He delineated how ethical branding, transparency, compassion, genuine connection would enhance customer loyalty and elevate employee morale, ultimately fortifying their market position. This isn't just business, it's a movement towards a workplace culture that values its people above profit margins. We have a responsibility to those who labor in our kitchens and those who toil behind the scenes. A murmur rippled through the room again, one that felt different curiosity, perhaps. David leaned closer, aware that the moment demanded vulnerability. I'm willing to align my own compensation with the success of this initiative, he asserted passionately. Let's test this new paradigm together. If it doesn't work, I'll be the first to take accountability. But if it does, sparks of possibility ignited the air. In a world that often prioritizes profit over purpose, we can demonstrate leadership. Imagine the narratives that we can create for our brand. Consumers want authenticity, they crave connection. As confident strides transformed him, the uncertainty that had shadowed him began to fade. The chairperson interjected, "This is bold, David. But what guarantees do we have?" David felt the weight of their doubts, every word a challenge. "There are no guarantees," David admitted, "but hope and connection are our best chances at sustainable success. Together, we create faith in our community and in our mission. This isn't mere altruism, it's a calculated step towards an ethical, prosperous future." One member finally spoke up, "If we're to move forward, we need metrics." "You mentioned stories, but we need data-driven insights as well." "Yes," David responded, feeling the internal rush of triumph. "I've already begun gathering metrics to back these narratives. We'll analyze retention rates, employee satisfaction surveys, production efficiencies. Each story can be backed by hard data to demonstrate the positive return on investment, and I'll ensure our changes are transparent every step of the way." The board members exchanged glances, the appeals to both heart and head seeming to build momentum. David pressed on, detailing how they might implement small pilot programs that could ripple outwards, tools and initiatives designed to recognize employee contributions, reward ethical actions, and so forth. And then came the pivotal moment. The silence that loved to linger hung in the air. Would they passively dismiss this momentum? Would they bury remuneration beneath a tidal wave of indifference? The weight of their collective stares bore down, every one of them waiting for the tipping point. Finally, the chair cleared his throat. "If you are prepared to commit to collecting the necessary data and operational adjustments, I say we explore this path forward. But it must be tied to targets and projections." Beneath the weight of their incredulity and doubt, a feeling of triumph surged through David. "Thank you," he managed with shaky breath, "we can begin drafting an action plan." As the discussion evolved from hesitance to cooperation, he felt the heavy chains of doubt crack. Over time, the once still air stirred with a pulse of possibility. The board had tentatively joined him, but he realized the real success lay ahead, pivoted toward executing the vision he had crafted alongside the numerous voices of the untouched. Exiting the boardroom, uplifted by their willingness to challenge conventional practice, David discovered a renewed sense of purpose coursing through him. He came to appreciate that authentic life was worth pursuing. The firm wrapped around him, no longer just a business but a narrative, an intertwining of purpose that propelled them forward. In the week that followed, he poured every ounce of energy into creating actionable plans, gathering testimonies, and analyzing performance metrics. Each conversation echoed with reverberations of purpose, lives beyond profit, presenting a trajectory that envisioned possibility. David's greatest achievement transformed into understanding that he held the ability to generate significant change, one that shaped the identity for what they could truly become. As he stood again in the break room, hearing laughter and shared stories emerge freely, he felt deeply connected, fulfilled in an authentic role as an advocate, not only for himself but for every humble dishwasher who dreamed of greatness. The journey had only begun. He was no longer simply a CEO, he had evolved into a changemaker, one who would forever champion the transformative power of meaningful human connection. Now is your chance to take action. You need to subscribe now to this channel, fueling our drive to uncover even more emotional stories of personal overcoming. Leave a like now to show your support and feed the algorithm for others to witness these incredible transformations. Comment your reactions and theories about David's metamorphosis below. Your perspective matters. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this inspiring conclusion. Be part of the change and help uplift others.